When Nina walked into my office, she carried herself with an air of composure that was almost convincing. Her clothes were immaculate, her hair carefully styled, but her eyes told another story. They flickered with frustration, exhaustion, and something deeper that she hadn't yet put into words. She sat down, crossed her legs tightly, and let out a sharp breath as if bracing herself. "We argue about dishes," she began, her voice steady but clipped. "But it's never really about the dishes. Last week, it was the laundry. Before that, it was the trash. It doesn't matter what it is, there's always something." She paused, her hands gripping the arms of the chair. "Alex says I'm impossible to please. That I'm nitpicking. But how can I not be angry when I feel like I'm doing everything alone? We both work full-time, but somehow, the house is my responsibility. And when I try to talk about it, he either shuts down or accuses me of nagging. I'm tired." I waited, letting her words hang in the air for a moment. Sometimes silence is where the truth finds its voice. "I don't know when it got this bad," she continued. "When we first got married, it was different. We split things, or at least it felt like we did. But now, it's like I'm his mom, not his wife." She stopped abruptly, her face tightening as if she regretted saying it out loud. "It's not like he's lazy," she added quickly. "He works hard at his job, and I know he loves me. He'll do little things, like making me coffee in the morning or surprising me with flowers, but it's like he doesn't see the bigger picture. He'll leave his socks on the floor right next to the laundry basket, and her voice broke, and she shook her head. "I lose it." I leaned forward, meeting her eyes. "Tell me more about what happens when you lose it." She gave a small, humorless laugh. "I explode. I go on and on about how I feel unappreciated, how I'm not a maid, how he needs to grow up. And then he'll snap back, saying I don't notice the things he does do, that I'm always criticizing him. We end up yelling, and nothing gets solved. It's like we're stuck in this cycle, and I don't know how to break it." Her words were raw, tinged with guilt but also desperation. It was clear that this wasn't just about household chores, it was about feeling unseen, unheard, and unloved. As I listened, I found myself thinking about how many couples had sat in that very chair, describing battles that seemed small on the surface but were fueled by deeper, unspoken fears. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm overreacting," Nina said softly. "Like maybe I should just let it go. But then I think, why should I? Why should it all fall on me?" Her voice grew firmer, the anger bubbling up again. "I don't want to resent him. I love him. But I feel like I'm running out of patience." This was where the real work would begin, unpacking the layers of resentment, expectations, and assumptions that had built up over time. Nina wasn't just fighting with Alex about chores, she was fighting against the fear that their marriage was becoming something she'd never wanted. As we wrapped up the session, I reminded Nina that what she was experiencing was more common than she realized and that conflict, while painful, could also be an opportunity for growth. If you've ever found yourself in a similar situation, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you struggled with finding balance in a relationship? What's worked for you, or what hasn't? Let's keep the conversation going. Nina walked in the following week with a slightly different energy. She looked less guarded, but the weight of frustration hadn't left her entirely. She sank into the chair and folded her hands in her lap, staring at them for a moment before she spoke. "I've been thinking about what we talked about last time," she began. "About how these arguments aren't really about the chores. And you were right. It's not the socks or the dishes. It's something else. But I don't know what to do with that." She exhaled, almost as if saying it aloud released some of the pressure. "Alex and I had a fight a few days ago. I was putting away laundry after working late, and he was sitting on the couch scrolling through his phone. I asked him if he could fold the towels, and he just didn't. Said he was tired and needed a minute. And I lost it. Completely lost it. I called him selfish, told him he doesn't care about me. I even said that I felt like I married my father. Her voice cracked at the last sentence. She looked up at me, her face both defensive and vulnerable, waiting to see how I'd react. I didn't mean it, she added quickly. Alex isn't my father. He's not that kind of man. But I couldn't stop myself from saying it. And the worst part is, he just looked at me like I'd slapped him. He didn't even yell back. He just went to bed. There was a long pause, and her hands fidgeted nervously in her lap. I know I hurt him, she continued. But I felt hurt too. And I didn't know how else to say it. I keep wondering if I'm ruining us. If I'm becoming someone I don't want to be. I asked her to tell me more about her father, and her expression shifted. She leaned back, almost as if she were retreating into a memory. He was absent, I guess. Not in the physical sense. He was there, sitting in his chair or reading the paper. But he was never really present. My mom did everything, cooked, cleaned, worked a part-time job. And he'd just sit there, expecting it. Sometimes she'd ask for help, and he'd make this big show of being annoyed, like it was such a chore for him to do anything around the house. Her voice grew softer. I remember being so angry at him. Angry for how he treated her. Angry at her for letting it happen. I used to think, that'll never be me. But now I'm scared it's happening anyway. She stopped and met my gaze, her eyes glistening. I don't want Alex to feel like I think he's a bad person. He's not. He's kind and funny and smart. But sometimes, when he doesn't do what I ask, it feels like he doesn't see me. Like he doesn't value me. And then I hear my mom's voice in my head, saying, men are just like that, Nina. You have to accept it. But I can't. I won't. As she spoke, the threads of her frustration began to reveal themselves. It wasn't just about chores or feeling unappreciated. It was about a fear that her marriage was slipping into the same patterns she'd grown up resenting, and a need to protect herself from becoming her mother. At the end of the session, I shared with Nina that breaking patterns from our past is difficult but not impossible. It starts with awareness, like the kind she was already showing, and continues with communication, both with her partner and with herself. If you've ever struggled with carrying the weight of family expectations into your own relationships, I'd love to hear about it. How do you navigate those moments when the past seems to creep into the present? Let's talk about it. Your story might resonate with someone else going through the same thing. Nina arrived for her next session with a mix of resolve and hesitation. She settled into the chair, her expression thoughtful, as if she'd spent the past week rehearsing what she wanted to say. After a moment, she began. I've been thinking about what you asked me to do, about why I feel so unseen. And I realized something. I don't know if I ever really told Alex what I need. I just expect him to know. It's like I assume he should already understand what I'm feeling, but he can't read my mind. She paused, her brow furrowing. I guess I was hoping he'd just see me, you know. Like if he loves me, he should notice what's wrong without me having to explain it. But maybe that's not fair. I asked her what it might look like to communicate her needs more openly. She thought for a moment before nodding, as if coming to a decision. I tried it the other night. After dinner, I told him I was feeling overwhelmed. I said it wasn't about blaming him, but that I needed help. I even thanked him for making dinner earlier in the week because I realized I usually focus on what he doesn't do, not what he does. Her lips twitched into a small smile. He looked surprised at first, like he wasn't sure what to say. But then he told me he had noticed I was stressed. He said he just didn't know how to bring it up without making it worse. That kind of caught me off guard. I always thought he didn't notice or didn't care, but maybe he was just afraid of saying the wrong thing. She leaned forward, her voice growing steadier. We ended up talking for almost 2 hours. About how he feels like I'm constantly disappointed in him, and how I feel like I'm carrying too much. He said he wants to help more but doesn't always know where to start. That's when I suggested we try one of those chore apps, to split things more evenly. Her eyes flickered with hope. We've only been using it for a few days, but it's helping already. I can see what he's done, and he can see what I've done, so it feels more balanced. And it's weird, I don't feel as resentful. Maybe because I know he's making an effort. She hesitated, her smile fading slightly. It's not perfect. We still have a lot to figure out. But for the first time, it feels like we're on the same side instead of fighting against each other. As she spoke, I could see the weight beginning to lift off her shoulders. It wasn't just about the chore app or dividing tasks, it was about rebuilding trust and finding a way to see each other again through the fog of assumptions and unmet expectations. Nina glanced at the clock and then back at me. I guess what I'm learning is that I can't expect Alex to fix something if I don't tell him it's broken. And maybe I need to give him the chance to show me he can be better, instead of deciding he won't. I told her she was taking the first steps towards something healthier and stronger. These moments of honesty and vulnerability would serve as the foundation for the partnership she wanted to create. If you've ever had to rebuild communication in a relationship, I'd love to know what worked for you. What tools or strategies helped you and your partner reconnect? Share your story in the comments, it might be just the thing someone else needs to hear. When Nina came in this time, she looked lighter, almost as if she'd shed some of the tension that had been clinging to her for weeks. She settled into her usual chair and smiled, a small, genuine smile that seemed to surprise even her. I think we're starting to figure things out, she began, her tone cautious but hopeful. Not everything, but enough to make it feel like we're moving forward. She sat back, her hands resting loosely in her lap, and exhaled. There was this moment the other day that really stuck with me. Alex was folding laundry, without me asking, by the way, and I walked into the room and just watched him for a second. And I don't know why, but it hit me that he's been trying in his own way this whole time. I just wasn't letting myself see it. Maybe because it didn't look exactly like what I thought effort should look like. She paused, her expression thoughtful. I told him that. I told him I was starting to notice the little things more, like how he's been using the chore app or making sure the kitchen is clean before I get home. And I thanked him. You should have seen his face, it was like I'd handed him the moon. Her smile widened, and for a moment, there was only warmth in her eyes. I think I've spent so much time focusing on what wasn't working that I didn't leave room to celebrate what was. And when I finally acknowledged it, something shifted. He started opening up more. Like the other night, he told me he's been afraid of disappointing me since the day we got married. He said he feels like I set the bar so high, and he's always one mistake away from falling short. She leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping. That broke my heart a little. I didn't realize how much pressure he'd been carrying. I thought he was just ignoring me, but maybe he was scared of letting me down. And I think, in some ways, I've been scared too, scared that if I didn't keep everything in line, our marriage would fall apart. Her eyes softened as she continued. It's like we've been dancing around each other's fears this whole time, without ever naming them. But now that we're talking about it, it doesn't feel so heavy anymore. It feels like we're finally on the same team. She sat back again, her expression calm and reflective. I know we're not done. There's still a lot to work through. But I think we're finally starting to understand each other, and that makes all the difference. Nina's journey was unfolding in a way that was both hopeful and deeply human. Her willingness to examine her own patterns and extend grace to her partner was creating a space where both she and Alex could grow. If this part of Nina's story resonates with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had a breakthrough moment in a relationship that changed how you saw things? Let's share and support each other. Your story could be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.